This is intolerable for both of us.
Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Massive thanks to the new subscribers that have just joined us, and a big thanks to the people who are still here that subscribed a while back. Really appreciate it. So a little while back I decided and announced that I was going to do a regular feature which was called Spotlight on Short Stories, and I've done a few videos on this, and I wanted to add a new one today, and it's about this collection here called Brave New Worlds. It's edited by John Joseph Adams, and I didn't realise, but I've got two other anthologies by him. That Wild West one that I started and then put aside for a little while, that's edited by him, and I've got a zombie one, Return of the Living Dead or something, or Night, what's it called? Something about the Living Dead. Might just be called The Living Dead, and that's an anthology that was good. This is absolutely fantastic. This is a collection of stories which you might be able to gather from the title Brave New World. It has a sort of dystopian thread running through it, so they're all stories that have a dystopian feel to them. Some of them are more obviously dystopian, some of them are kind of thought experiments on how society could be distorted, so it's not quite as complete as a dystopia, but it's still exploring an idea or a nightmarish situation. And the quality in the stories, the way the stories that Adams has chosen to include in this collection is phenomenal. Absolutely top quality stuff. So I really recommend this collection. So if you have a look on the front, you've got some big names listed on the top anyway. So Ursula K. Le Guin and Kim Stanley Robinson and Kate William, Neil Gaiman, Orson Scott Card, J.G. Ballard, loads of big names. Shirley Jackson's in there as well, Harlan Ellison, Kurt Vonnegut. There's some new people like Sarah Langan's in there, and Philip K. Dick is in there as well. Absolutely like phenomenal list of people. It's a really good collection. So what I wanted to say was that this is absolutely worth your time and money getting this collection anyway. And I was going to talk a little bit about why these kind of stories are so cool and such an important element in science fiction, and why science fiction is so good at this sort of thing. It literally lends itself to this sort of thing. And I was going to talk about 10 stories in particular. So it's like 500 pages, and there's quite a lot of stories in them because quite a lot of them are quite short as well. Basically, what I wanted to start off with, before I talk about these 10 stories in particular, I just wanted to say that science fiction does many things. Sometimes it can be humorous and pulpy and adventurous. Sometimes it can explore how technology can affect our lives, and in explorations in artificial intelligence and robotics, it can talk about how we might develop our society with AI included in it, and it can raise questions about slavery as well, and you can look into our own behaviour through the way we treat robots and that kind of stuff. That can be really cool. It can explore sort of biological aspects of speculation in looking at other worlds and expanding on what we know about life and life's makeup and the chemical makeup of life through aliens and other worlds and other star systems and that kind of stuff. So you can look at physics like that. You can look at time travel and look at how you can learn lessons from that and all that kind of stuff. There's loads of things you can look at, and the dystopian aspects of science fiction is definitely one of those elements of science fiction that's all about cautionary tales. I love cautionary tales. It's why I love the Twilight Zone, because there's so many cautionary tales in the Twilight Zone. And if you like, the two subgenres that get mixed up a lot, dystopia and post-apocalyptic stories, they get mixed up a lot in people's minds, but they're both cautionary tales. I mean, obviously the post-apocalyptic thing is not necessarily government-led. It can be just a natural disaster that's led to, quite often it's a natural disaster that's led to people having to survive without fuel or water or food or any kind of economic or societal political system, that kind of thing. So, you know, the dystopia is different because it's the way that the world's organised and the way that society is organised that creates this nightmarish world. So that's where these stories start, with this idea of giving you some things to think about with these cautionary tales about how society could be reorganised in a nightmarish way. So the first story in the book is the Shirley Jackson story. So Shirley Jackson is a phenomenal writer, but one of her most famous stories is the one that's in here, and it is literally one of the greatest dystopian stories. It's still shocking. It's very direct and matter of fact, even though what is happening in the story is really shocking. It was written in 1948. It's not a very long story, but it really does pack a punch. So if you don't know Shirley Jackson's Lottery, there is a Shirley Jackson collection that's just called The Lottery and Other Stories. But if you just want to read that story, it's in this collection. So that's what kicks off the book. And then the second one I wanted to talk about was the Ursula K. Le Guin story, which is called The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, which is another famous story. And which is one of the things that is really good about this book is there's quite famous stories and some newer stories that aren't quite as famous, which is quite nice. But this is definitely one that has been anthologized a lot. So it has featured in lots of different things, as well as being in one of these books. I think it's in the first World's 12 Quarters book. So it is part of the Heinous cycle. So she wrote loads and loads of books in this same universe. But this particular story has this dystopian element at its core. And it's this utopia that absolutely hangs on this horrible truth that gets revealed at the end of the story, that the utopia works because of something that the society has decided to do, that when you're reading it, you're thinking, okay, I think that's possibly going too far. And the Ursula K. Le Guin one was written in 1973. So in 1972, so a very similar date, Kate Wilhelm produced The Funeral. And The Funeral appeared in Harlan Ellison's anthology, again, Dangerous Visions. So the original Dangerous Visions was quite a famous anthology that Harlan Ellison edited. But again, Dangerous Visions was one of the follow-ups. I think it was the third one. And that was the first time that The Funeral appeared. But now it appears in this one as well. And The Funeral is a really interesting story that's got a very pervasive, eerie, claustrophobic mood to it. Kind of reminds me a little bit of The Handmaid's Tale. It's got this sort of feeling of these powerless women that get trained up to have particular skills to service society, or service men really, in their society. And it follows about 4 characters and built around this distant respect they've got for this character that this funeral is built around. But the story in general just creates this dystopian society that is very much pigeonholing women into this subservient role, and there's this feeling through the whole thing that they are powerless to change it. And it's brilliantly written because you get that sense of claustrophobia and utter powerlessness in it. So yeah, The Funeral by Kate Wilhelm is an absolutely brilliant story. In 1978, J.G. Ballard released Millennium. Millennium was an interesting one. Again, these are consistent to the theme, but they are quite different. And Millennium is a story that's really claustrophobic, and it's all about accommodation. And these apartments start getting smaller and smaller and smaller due to overpopulation. And the government are ordering landlords to decrease the size of the apartments that they're renting out. And you've got these characters that are trying to survive in a way that like their apartments can just about fit a bed in and nothing else. And then they're talking about reducing it again. It's quite a short story, but it's really powerful because it really shows the absurdity of that extreme case of being kind of clumped together in this overpopulated, crowded society. So yeah, Millennium was really, really good. And I'm just about to delve into JT Bell in a big way. I just feel like I'm going to really like him. But Millennium's really good. That was from 1978. Repent Harlequin said, "The TikTok Man is my favourite Harlan Ellison story." So that came out in 1965. So again, a relatively old story, one of his early ones, and it's so brilliant. I think I personally like it more than any other Harlan Ellison story, but he's obviously got about half a dozen really, really famous ones. But this one is where government control time in the sense of like you being late for something, then you owe the government time if you're late for work and that kind of thing. And that kind of regimented way that society is ordered starts getting messed around by this sort of anarchistic vigilante kind of social commentator called the Harlequin, who's trying to wake up society and stop this regimented control from the TikTok Man. And yeah, it's really good. And actually, I mean, this is a great way to have it because it's such a great anthology. But I would recommend looking for Harlan Ellison's audio version because it's on YouTube, and it's just so cool listening to him reading out because he's got a very good voice. And yeah, he reads it so well. Perfect Match is a story from 2012. So that's the year that this was released. So it's probably the last, when this came out, it was probably the most recent story that had come out when this edition came out, because it's the second edition. The first edition of this book came out in 2011, and this edition came out in 2012. So this story, called The Perfect Match, came out in 2012 and was written by Ken Liu. So Ken Liu is quite famous as a translator of The Three-Body Problem. I think that's Cixin Liu, I think. But he's translated lots of works into English. And Ken Liu wrote Perfect Match. And oh my God, that is just such a fantastic story. It's brilliant. I want to find more stories that explore the dangers / evils / problems with social media and our attachment to the internet and our reliance on it, our worship of it, and how, you know, these sort of consequences for it. Because I do think it's a fascinating subject, but also think I'm seeing firsthand its results as a teacher, and I do worry about that kind of thing. So this story called The Perfect Match is a really good story where there's this one company that control all of the media, so not just the social media but all the news media as well, and they've got this sort of app on their phones that can know absolutely everything about you and advise you what to do, what to eat, when to have a rest, and it's kind of an extension of the internet sites that can match you up with someone, you know, with your new partner. So it just takes that sort of thing to the extreme, and it's basically advising you on every single aspect of your life, and it really plays with that idea brilliantly, so that it gets explored by the main character, who starts to doubt that this is actually a good thing. And I won't spoil it by saying how it ends, but it's just a fantastic exploration of the problems with our reliance on social media and on websites. So yeah, Perfect Match by Ken Liu is really, really good, and that's from 2012. Harrison Bergeron is from 1961, and that's the Kurt Vonnegut story that is quite famous. I think that's been anthologized a lot as well. Harrison Bergeron, and it's a society where, because of this need to make sure that everything's equal, anyone that excels in something has a government handicap given to them, so they can't explore that ability or specialism that they've got. It's absolutely right. What happens in the story is so extreme that it is frightening and horrific and crazy. So the idea that you would limit you'd limit anyone's ability to excel at something by putting something in their brain or giving them a physical handicap and that kind of thing would be like a horrific exploration of that idea of creating equality. I think if anyone wanted to argue that that's what people mean when they say they want equality, then that's clearly missing the point. But yeah, a brilliant story and quite satirical in that sense, but very serious and very powerful. So Kurt Vonnegut's story, Harrison Bergeron from 1961. From 2010, there's a really awesome story called Personal Jesus. And Personal Jesus is by someone called Jennifer Pelland, who I hadn't heard of before. And it's a really good story. It's very short again. And funnily enough, she took inspiration from the Depeche Mode song Personal Jesus, which is a great song. And it's like a device that people put on them that is attached to their body that is literally a personal Jesus. So it's like a religious figure that can give them a little shock if they do or think the wrong thing that goes against the religion. And it's within the context of areas of America being at war with each other, and there's a suggestion it's a cultural war, like a religious war, and this idea that they've gone to these extremes to try and control people's behaviour and their thoughts. So yeah, it's a really nice, could be a little bit obvious, but it works really well, I think. And yeah, Personal Jesus by Jennifer Pelland. And there's from 1956, you've got Minority Report from Philip K. Dick. This story is obviously quite famous because of the really good Tom Cruise film. And if you don't know, it's a society that's developed precognition to the point where there's this thing called pre-crime, where there are these people with special abilities that can predict when someone's going to commit a crime, and someone can be arrested before they've committed the crime. So it's like a crimeless society that's become crimeless because these people can prevent the crime from happening, but they can still arrest the perpetrator because they were going to do it. So there's that question of how likely were they going to actually do it if they thought about it, and should you be punishing someone for the scenario that was in their head before they've actually done it. It's a really interesting concept that only science fiction could explore. So yeah, Minority Report is a very good story and works really well with the way that Philip K. Dick writes it. He's got a very specific way of writing, I think, and if you're attuned to the way he writes, then you'd love that as much as the film. But it is a good film. And the last one I wanted to talk about is a story written by Sarah Langan called Independence Day, which came out in 2009. And that's a much smaller scale story, and it's all built around Trina, who is clearly living in a society that's quite very oppressive, but it's vaguely described. But what is in a lot of detail in the story is her relationship with her father and her relationship with her mother, and basically she rats on her father to the government because he hits her, and she has to deal with the consequences of that. So it's kind of exploring that. So it's from her angle. She's a 13-year-old girl, so it's from a 13-year-old girl's perspective, which is quite different. So that was a really interesting story from Sarah Langan, and first story I've ever read by her as well. So yeah, 10 stories that are really good snapshots of how good this book is. It's a really, really good anthology. Lots of classic stories in there, as well as lots of newer stories. So yeah, have you read this book? Have you read some of those stories? Let me know which other dystopian stories you'd like to see in an anthology like this. Short stories are awesome, aren't they? Thanks a lot. Bye.